Specters! Welcome back to the Mass Effect Lorecast. This is your host, Tom, or Robots. I'm here with N7 the Legend, and Sam. We are getting back to the lore today. We've got more Tali stuff to talk about.
Yes, we have returned to the lore, a much anticipated return. We have been reading some of the YouTube comments. So
yeah, some people are like, hey, when are you guys going to finish this Tali thing? It's been like weeks now. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of other stuff that's come up. Sorry about that. We'll get there. Don't worry. It's coming.
And now we're here.
We're here. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to discuss the exciting and or maybe tragic ending to Tali's story in Mass Effect 3. Just as a kind of a quick refresher for if you're jumping in now and you didn't listen to our previous 2 episodes on Tali, her story began for Mass Effect fans when she was just this Quarian leaving home for the first time, and then she finds a world that's just so much darker and more grim than she ever dreamed of. And then we see her mature in Mass Effect 2, ultimately grieving the sudden loss of her father, who is this man who never gave her the affection that children deserve. And but he did task her with finding a homeworld for her people. And that final goal, very integral to her character development throughout the entire trilogy. But we're going to be talking a lot about that today.
Yeah, so we're now on to Mass Effect 3 stuff. And as development progresses through the series, the whole decision tree starts to spread out. So where exactly do we find her in Mass Effect 3, or how does she find us?
Well, she continues maturing, and she kind of finds us as a natural progression of her own career and her own abilities. One of 2 ways, though. It differs a little bit. She goes back to the fleet after Mass Effect 2, no matter what you did with her trial. But if you kept her from being exiled, then she's promoted to Admiral. Interestingly, I know nothing of the formal process through which a Quarian citizen becomes an admiral, but Tali was given some of the best military training in the fleet. We know this from Shepard's own statements in earlier games, so maybe that had something to do with it. And of course, her father, having been an admiral, is likely part of it, but I don't know if the official process is always a, what is that called? With family
hereditary
rule?
Yeah.
Hereditary rule. Yeah. I don't know if it's that, given how otherwise democratic their society is. I kind of doubt it. But in Tali's case, this is the case. If you keep her from being exiled, but if you don't, if you instead chose to share the evidence of her father's negligence with the Geth experimentation with the fleet, then she's sent into exile in Mass Effect 2. So she doesn't become an admiral, but she does ultimately return, and she helps the Admiralty Board as kind of this hush-hush basis. She's a clandestine advisor on the Geth because her experience with the Geth is irreplaceable.
Yeah, I guess either direction, she's gained a lot of experience and a lot of connections, and so it would make sense for her to play either role.
Yeah, and I think it's a very genius way for the writers to kind of take 2 choices and loop them back into the same canon starting point. So then that way they can, all circumstances go from there.
Yeah, simplify the tree a little bit by bringing 2 branches back together, that kind of thing.
Right, because if she was if you had one person's Mass Effect 3 where she starts in exile and the Quarian fleet wants nothing to do with her, and then another one where she's part of the Admiralty Board and making executive level decisions, that's a lot of differences just from the get-go.
Right. And if you multiply that across all of the other characters, that becomes you're now writing dozens of storylines rather than simplifying it and being able to actually produce a video game and put it out for people to play, because that would take forever.
Right. You can't have 36 different starting points in Mass Effect 3.
Yeah.
I mean, now with Baldur's Gate 3 having released, and I forget what crazy number of endings they said that there is in Baldur's Gate 3, maybe Larian would choose to disagree with me. And if that's the case, if anyone working with Larian is thinking this, how about you go ahead and tap BioWare on the shoulder and help us out for the next Mass Effect?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The previous Baldur's Gates, like many game series, regardless of what you played and what you did in your play, they all define a canon ending and then move on from that canon ending. And that's something that the Mass Effect series has pushed back against
Oh, very heavily.
Very heavily. So they're not saying this is the canon ending regardless of what you did. They're saying, okay, this is what you did. Your story continues. And that is a way more complex way of continuing writing a video game. It really amplifies the complexity.
Yeah, if that's how they choose to go about the next Mass Effect, I'll be surprised, but not from like a pragmatic point.
Well, I don't like, this is a whole side topic. I don't know how you take the actual conclusion of Mass Effect 3 and then say like any of those options work. Let's design a story from there. Like that feels too conclusive. I feel like at the end of that trilogy, you have to define something as the canon ending and then move forward, because otherwise you're now developing 4 different games at least at the same time.
At least.
Yeah.
Well, at least, at the very least 2. One where the Reapers are still around, one where they're not.
But even then, like,
basis.
Yeah. Oh man. But yeah, there's so many other complexities. Anyway, that would be a fun topic for maybe a patron chat. But
you know what? If people want to listen more about that, we talked about it at length on N7 Day, so you can go back and listen to that. But
that's true.
About Tali, either way, you can sense this added level of responsibility that she expresses for her own people and for the welfare of them when we meet her in Mass Effect 3. And she's also just kind of a boss-ass bitch when we meet her in Mass Effect 3. She walks on the Normandy, especially, if she's been promoted to Admiral and you're like, oh shit, she's, a big shot now. And so we have a clip from this scene that I'm talking about when she walks on the Normandy, and this is the romance version. So for the Mass Effect Tali fans that are going to listen and say, Tali best girl, I always romance her, you're going to be happy that we chose this version. But here's her coming aboard the Normandy while Shepard talks with the other admirals.
Admiral?
It's mostly a formality. I'm an expert on the Geth.
That you are.
I'm glad you're here.
Why didn't you tell me? I would have helped.
Thanks, but I knew you had your own problems. I'm sorry about Earth. We've got the largest fleet in the galaxy. If you can help us, we'll hit the Reapers with everything we've got. Or however much is left from this stupid war.
I thought you'd support the invasion.
No. After talking to Legion, I thought maybe there was a chance for peace.
So why help them?
I'm an admiral. People look to me for guidance. Public disagreement would divide the fleet.
And what about us? Would us being together divide the fleet?
No. Well, possibly. I don't know. But right now, I've got civilian ships taking fire. Can we keep this quiet, at least in front of the admirals?
Sure thing, Miss Vas Normandy.
Thank you. If you want to talk in private, maybe you could invite me up to your cabin?
Maybe I could.
The romance part's always fun.
I like the cat and mouse nature of the Shepard Tali romance. But that is at the same time that she's clearly gained some maturity from, how we met her in Mass Effect 1. Where how many times in that conversation was she expressing that she's responsible for the unification of the fleet, right? And keeping them not divided. And that's the rhetoric of a leader.
Yeah, I can't disagree.
Yeah. I also found it interesting that during that conversation, Shepard just assumes that Tali would support the invasion to take back Rannoch, their homeworld. And I was racking my brain for why he might assume that. And I think it's because if you're a Shepard, then you are going off of what she voiced way back in Mass Effect 1, that the Quarians have a rightful claim to the homeworld. In Mass Effect 1, you remember Tali was very anti-Geth and was an advocate for her people to the point of not even considering the Geth as people. And honestly, that idea wasn't really brought about until after Mass Effect 1 anyway. But depending on how you played, she does indeed talk about her interactions with Legion, and she'll talk about how that kind of gave her pause. If you were Tali, Tom, I mean, would you be more worried about the fleet and the unification of your people, or the possibility that you might be waging war on sentient AI? with thoughts and feelings and whatnot.
Yeah, I think for most people and most races, you're going to first consider the survival of you and your species. I think that's almost always the fundamental thing. And if something else has to get thrown out, say some moral concern, in order for you to survive, survival's usually the first concern. So I can see the justification for that. It's a nice rock in a hard place conundrum. And, you always want to be able to say, well, the moral thing would be, there's sentient life too, and you got to take care of that and be careful. But if you have a fleet that's dying and aging out of the technology that's going to keep them alive, they need to do something. And sometimes you have to, I don't know, break some eggs in order to make an omelet.
That's well put. I was just going to bring that up. The whole, as kind of a reminder for our listeners, this is after, and considering that Tali is now an admiral, she was probably briefed on this, that at the highest levels of Quarian security clearance, they are actively talking about the fleet is dying of entropy. It is just not meant to hold an entire race for hundreds and hundreds of years. And they have a hard end date on when they believe the fleet will collapse. And that's not too far from here. It's like 75 or 80 years, I think.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the Reapers are invading.
Right.
So there's that too. So there's multiple fires under the asses of the admirals. Cool band name idea, but but this is a good example of like relative morality. And I don't think that Tali is mistaken for kind of considering the unification of her people, but I do give her credit for, at the same time, clearly mulling over the idea of her interactions with Legion and considering, are we in the right here? Now, dividing the fleet, romance aside, it's interesting that unity is among the concerns, because we never heard anything like that from her before. And I think that means she's kind of filling her father's shoes.
Yeah, it also feels like she's more included in the information and also has matured a bit. So it's part of a character arc. It totally makes sense.
Yeah. And you caught that she mentioned catching up in private, right? Well, when you talk with her one-on-one again, and again, romance aside, she confides in you these thoughts that she can't really express in front of the other admirals. She's worried for the entirety of her race, in what she implies is kind of an inevitable war with the Geth. But here's where things are a little bit different depending on how you handle the whole trial in Mass Effect 2. So if you only played through this game once or maybe 2 times, you may have heard different variations of this conversation. But basically, if you did what I did in my last, what I consider authentic playthrough, and I can get grilled by our listeners later about why I decided authentically that I would turn over the evidence that her father had in the trial. But if you did that, if you turn over the evidence and you tell the truth to the Admiralty Board about her father's experiments, well, despite losing her loyalty in Mass Effect 2, if you somehow kept her alive through that suicide mission and then she makes it to Mass Effect 3, then she apologizes to you and says that you did the right thing in telling everyone the truth, even though it didn't make her happy at the time.
That's interesting. Another character development moment.
Yes. She's putting her personal feelings aside. She's putting her whole ego aside and examining things from the outside in and saying, you know what? Yeah, that was the right call.
Yeah, this is something I wish more people would do. It's one thing if you get upset in the moment but it's another thing to take time later to realize, okay, maybe this is actually what happened, cool off and see things from a different angle, even though it still might be painful to you. To understand things from a different perspective is something that takes a lot of guts in a way.
Yeah, a lot of introspection and yeah, a lot of guts, moral fortitude, if we want to call it that.
Right. It's funny. It's funny that so many people in our society stick to your guns. If you believe a thing, believe it always, and never change your mind. And it's like, well, what about when presented with alternative evidence or somebody else's perspective that you care about? Wouldn't that be the wrong answer in those cases? Shouldn't you be more like Tali?
But you know what's weird? And I was thinking about this in American culture, flip-flopping on an issue and waffling on something is so frowned upon.
Yes.
And I started racking my brain for why. Why is that? And I guess at the very minimum, you could be considered indecisive, right? For flip-flopping on something, or untrustworthy because maybe you're changing your answer depending on who's listening.
Right.
But
Right.
if you're flip-flopping over the course of a decade, like that's to be expected. I don't know if you can consider that flip-flopping. You know, people mature and they change, they learn new things, and their standards change.
Or keeping beliefs kind of floating until you have enough evidence to then plant your flag in and say, okay, this is what I believe about it. The scientific method is another example of this. Science doesn't believe anything. Science has lots of proof that certain things are more likely than other things. And given enough proof that the alternate thing or a different answer is actually more accurate, science will then convey that that's the more likely thing. Science isn't waffling. Science is updating the data in order to get a more and more accurate view of the thing that you're looking at. And to apply that to your own mindset is actually beneficial in human relationships. You know, maybe I didn't understand your perspective. Maybe I didn't understand all the things you considered before you made that decision. Now that I do, I'm going to change my mind a little bit, and maybe I'll be more accepting of the thing you decided to do, just like Tali is right here, you know?
Exactly. That's it. I was going to say that is exactly what Tally's doing. And I think that's why it's so crucial to be able to wake up. First, you got to wake Legion up. You can't just let them, hang out in the car or the AI core and never wake him up. You can't give him over to Cerberus. You got to wake him up, and I think it's so crucial for Tally's development to have those interactions with Legion, so that she can look at herself differently. Not even just consider the humanity, for lack thereof a better term, the humanity within Legion and all other Geth, but also so that she can take a hard look in the mirror at her own people. So. That happens if you decided to tell the Admiralty Board about her father's experiments. She apologizes, but if she's exiled, the power dynamic is different because she doesn't take too kindly to the extreme warhawks like Zen, Admiral Zen. Zen arguably doesn't really view the Geth as people at all or anything more than little playthings to experiment on. And yet, if she's not exiled, if Tali is not exiled, then she becomes that admiral. And then so she can say how, she has a say in how affairs are handled. And then she's listened to. So the power dynamic is still a little different, but they do bring it back around so that they have a common starting place for the game. And remember, when we're talking about this exiling, there's really no greater punishment in Quarian society than exile. They don't have the resources to spare for capital punishment. So it's not just a huge punishment in Quarian society. It is social death is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this is kind of the stuff leading up to her being part of a crew. When does that happen?
So that's the Geth Dreadnought mission, where you have to disable the Reaper signal being broadcast, and then that's using to upgrade, I'm using quotes, air quotes, upgrading the Geth because the Reapers are basically trying to take control of them through the synthetic form of indoctrination. And Tali is absolutely essential during this mission. She understands Geth technology like none other, and if Legion is alive, then this makes for an interesting dialogue at the end of this mission. But I also think that this comes very late in Mass Effect 3 because Tali lovers undoubtedly will agree with me here, but they must have been a little bit disappointed that we don't get more time with Tali in the finale of this trilogy, because we don't before this kind of Geth Quarian War arc in Mass Effect 3, we can't get Tali early. There's no way to bring her on board and have her as a squad mate early. So.
Right. Yeah, Mass Effect 3 has this way of like rolling out certain characters and bringing them back in based on the mission you go on or where you are in the story. Yeah,
there's several arcs within the game itself, and this is one of them. So there are numerous great one-liners after you've picked up Tali, and she hangs around after, kind of after the arc is done. And there's great one-liners and hilarious conversations, and kind of like, in Mass Effect 1, there was the elevator dialogue, right? Well, in Mass Effect 3, there's kind of the ambient dialogue on the ship and other places. So between meeting her and landing on Rannoch, there's some great scenes and some afterward too. But here's a pretty funny scene that I wanted to take note of, and it's in the Normandy's Lounge. A lot of people love this scene in Mass Effect 3. It's a fan favorite, but it actually has some truth to it. So I want to examine the truth in this scene. This is directly after Horizon, where Miranda confronts her father and ends up dying in the process.
Shepard! Want a drink? I'm toasting Miranda, I think.
How are you getting drunk?
Very carefully. Taurian brandy, triple filtered, then introduced into the suit through an emergency induction port.
That's a straw, Tali.
Emergency induction port. It's actually getting a little harder to get it into the slot. I think that means it's working. She was so rude. What did Jack call her? Cerberus cheerleader? With her perfect genes and that attitude and still, she got it done. She stopped her father.
I didn't realize this would be so hard on you.
I didn't like her. Keela, she was such a bitch. But I respected her. Sometimes that's better than liking. She did whatever it took to stop her father. She never gave in to him, never changed herself to please him.
So, drunk Tali, best Tali?
I love drunk Tali. She's one of the few characters who gets drunk. I love drunk Tali, but and that scene is hilarious. But I also want to focus on the fact that Tali takes this interest in Miranda and Miranda's dynamics with her father. And it doesn't take a lot to analyze why Tali might care about that specifically, because Tali's own father is this estranged, almost mythological figure.
Yeah. They have some parallels there a little bit.
Oh, yeah. They both have daddy issues. Yeah. And so I think Tali respects Miranda's approach to, you know, not being afraid to give her father back. Well, I was going to say to give him his shit right back, but I mean, in fact, Miranda kills him. So right. You know, that's an understatement. But Tali respects that, I think, because I think deep inside Tali is this hurting person who is saying, why weren't you ever there for me?
Yeah.
And Tali's father wasn't. He had these big, you know, grand and abstract ideas about protecting the fleet and the burden of command, but he was a terrible father.
Yeah, this is one of those stories we hear about a lot of children of great people, and those people like focus on the things that made them great to the detriment sometimes of spending time with their families.
Yeah. And so I think Tali has this anger for her father inside, much like Miranda did, for different reasons. But I also think that Tali wanted a chance to confront her father, especially after what we learned in Mass Effect 2 with his experiments on the Geth, you know? And I think Tali wanted that closure that would come from a confrontation. Like, how could you lie to me? How could you ask me to send you back Geth parts and not tell me what you were doing with them, knowing that it would amount to treason? How could you do this? How could you put your own daughter in this situation? Tali never got that closure. So for Miranda to get closure by seeing her father in person and then ending the threat, I think this is what Tali really takes to heart.
Yeah, I agree. That makes sense.
Yeah. So I encourage people to check more of those, you know, great Tali scenes out. There's tons of compilations on YouTube. But for our purposes in examining her character, let's jump to a scene where I think part of her destiny is fulfilled, no matter how it ends. So I'm talking about when Shepard and Tali land on Rannoch. This is really a long time coming for her, and it's pretty integral and central to her character development.
I can't believe it. I don't think it's really sunk in yet. The home world. My world. Look at the sky. And the rock formations. They used to write poems about them.
When we're done, maybe you'll write a new one.
This is Ranok, the world of our ancestors. Our bodies carried the seeds that spread the desert grass. You've heard me say Kilasalai? The best translation I can come up with is, by the homeworld I hope to see someday.
Looks like you're seeing it today.
The living room window will be right here.
Something I should know?
I just claimed the land. I know it doesn't mean much, but when this is over, I'll have a home.
The Quarians spent centuries as nomads. You think you can go back to living in one place?
We have gotten used to carrying our homes around with us. Well, that's a start.
The music, I mean, obviously the voice acting, we always praise the voice acting, but the music specifically in this scene, I feel like is particularly effective.
Yeah, you know what song that is? It's Vigil, that's the name, but it's also the song from the very menu when you boot up Mass Effect 1.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes. So I wanted to talk about that. The fact that they chose Vigil to play in this scene specifically is, I think, the developers' way of trying to get us to think back to Mass Effect 1, to think back on all the journeys we've made since then.
Yeah, it's been a long trip. Reflect. Yeah. That's cool. That's really cool.
So I think it's supposed to convey this nostalgia to the player, because right now Tali is feeling a form of nostalgia, which is interesting because it's a nostalgia for a place she's never been before.
It's like a nostalgia for her ancestry, but not something she's experienced. Yeah, it's a cool concept.
So I can imagine Tali setting foot on Rannoch, and it's almost like she has, rows and rows of the ghosts of her ancestors standing behind her, thinking that every decision they ever made was so that she could have this moment right now.
Right.
And that's a really special feeling for Tali.
Yeah, the sacrifice of all these generations so that at some point their children could return. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is also what Tali's father promised her. In a video message, you remember like several episodes ago, we were talking about the comic that takes place before Mass Effect 1. Tali goes on her pilgrimage, and her father's video message is playing to her. Well, this is what he promised her, that she would have a home on the home world. And imagine how she feels now. She says, I just claimed the area. This is where the living room window will go. And she's touching the soil on this world that for her and at least 3 generations of her entire race, people away from the fleet aside, this world existed only through the stories of her people.
Right. This in a future, more settled version of, this community and this culture is going to become a Hallmark special.
She returns home for Christmas. Her car gets stuck in the mud.
Yeah, I've been wandering the universe and I'm finally planting my home here. Give me a kiss, Shepard. That kind of thing.
There's a dashing, wealthy space captain, divorced but never had kids,
right.
Who comes to rescue and get her car out of the mud.
Yeah.
She's like, let's talk about my homeworld in your private quarters.
Right.
Yeah.
But of course the camera pans away and doesn't ever show the scene because it's like made for TV. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure I'd want to see a Hallmark sex scene anyway. But, well, that's pretty much all I have for the beginning half of the show.
All right, let's go thank our patrons. We'll be right back.
Message coming in. Patching it through.
I am sovereign, and this
Lorecast
is mine. I like the sound of that.
So welcome to our 2 newest patrons, Ryan S. and Architect Art. Thank you for signing up and joining us on the Patreon. And shout out to all 67 of our current patrons. Thank you for being here and supporting us. And our Shepherd tier Patreon patrons, words are hard, that get shout outs every week. Kokashins, Edboy, Kira C, Lieutenant Tessino, and William, thank you so much for your support, and everybody who supports this show. Thank you so very much. Also, if you'd like to leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, we'll read it out on a future episode. We don't have any new ones this week, but go ahead and leave one. Maybe we'll read it next week. Also, you can rate the show on Spotify or whatever podcast you're listening to this on, or tell your friends or your family if they're into Mass Effect, any of that stuff. So thank you to everybody for the support. Without you, we couldn't do the show. So let's move on with the rest of the episode.
Spit it out, or are you trying to build suspense?
You're so dense, sir. Obviously, I do not know as much about human relationships as I thought.
So her story at this point, she's reunited with her people's home world. And then we still have the problem of like the war with the Geth. Like, is she more or less compelled at this point?
I think it's a complicated answer because on one hand, she's inspired. The fabled goal is now real. You know, the finish line is within grasp. And she has been to the homeworld that she and millions of others wished to see one day. So she'll be damned she'll be damned if it's not hers, if it's snatched away from her and her people right at the finish line. So, but on the other hand, I think that she's learned even more about the Geth and how different life may have been without the Reaper's control over who the Geth call the heretics, which is the faction of Geth who worshipped the Reapers as the old gods. Eden Prime, without that control from the Reapers, Eden Prime wouldn't have happened. And who knows how long the Reapers had been influencing the Geth. I don't know. And if Legion's alive, she now has a personal connection to a Geth. So I think it's a complicated answer. It's less complicated if you didn't keep Legion alive. If you never woke Legion up. It's less complicated.
I mean, drawing from real world, it's very easy to say, oh, those are those people over there. They're not with me or us, and so therefore I'm going to assume bad things about them. Like that's just nature of human beings, right? But when you work alongside people of different cultures and different backgrounds and you get to know them, you start to realize how much you actually have in common. And usually it's most things, and there's just a few things that are different, right? I would imagine in this situation, it's kind of similar. You spend time getting to know Legion, you start to understand that, oh, maybe this actually is a person, and then you start having a little bit more empathy for the rest of the Geth.
Yeah, I think so. Because it's abstract. If Tali doesn't know Legion, it's abstract when you talk about Geth-Corian relations, because how often do they actually interact? So it's this abstract idea where it's easy to be like, well, they are the evil robot race who exterminated 98% of our people, which is true, by the way. And on the Geth side, not like they have a lot of verbal conversation. They talk amongst themselves, digitally. But, it'd be easy for them to make the argument. The creator race tried to destroy our race when they realized how intelligent we are. So you guys remember that?
Yeah,
I remember that.
We kind of had to protect ourselves. We were like, you would have done the same thing.
Right. So both sides justifiable in the abstract. But, and this is something that I've noticed a lot in our own world. When people get to know each other more and more, fighting and war becomes less common. People don't want to go to war.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to punch your friend in the face unless they really deserve it, I guess.
Right. And it's also why countries with very similar cultures and shared historical, or shared histories rarely go to war with each other. And when they do, it doesn't last long.
Right.
Yeah. Right. But ultimately, Tali's father made a promise to her, and she in turn a promise to her people that they would have this homeland again. And she chooses to pursue that with minor variation depending on how you and your choices have influenced her. So let's jump forward now to where the variation is seen again. After defeating the Reaper broadcast signal to who's trying to take control of the Geth on Rannoch, Legion takes it upon itself to upload Reaper code to all the platforms so that they can achieve full autonomy. Kind of a Bicentennial Man moment for anyone who watched that Robin Williams movie.
Okay.
But Warhawk, there are these Warhawk admirals in the fleet who are like, now's our chance to strike. And I can only imagine Shepard's like, what a fucking buffoon you are. like, why would you? No, stop. I've worked for 3 goddamn games now. Do not do this. So, but they're like, now's our chance to strike. And so they're thinking the Geth are vulnerable during this kind of like reboot sesh where the broadcasting signal from the Reaper is gone and Legion's trying to upgrade their code. And they're kind of like in this sleep mode. And that's how the Quarians view it anyway. They're like, now's our chance to strike. And this leads to a very dramatic conclusion with Legion and Tali's stories, both lobbying Shepard to really side with them. This is one of the impossible choices of Mass Effect. Right. It is one of the impossible choices. You need a lot. You need a lot of the right decisions at the right time. And you need a lot of Paragon or Renegade score to do this, but it's impossible. It's if you rush through this story, I guarantee you're going to have a straight up bad time in this scene.
Yeah. Okay. So how does it end? Like, what are the possibilities here?
Well, like I said, it depends on your choices, and I don't just mean choices in this specific conversation.
Right.
You need huge Renegade score. I believe that's 70 or 75%. Either Renegade or Paragon to be able to choose those options, those choices and the dialogue tree. But it also, you need to have made several different choices along the way. Are both Legion and Tali alive? Because if they're not, things are a lot more complicated. What did you do in Tali's trial? That is really a key here. What you did in Tali's trial has long-lasting effects. How did you handle Legion's loyalty mission with the heretics in Mass Effect 2? If you even did that loyalty mission. Did you save Admiral Chorus in Mass Effect 3? These are just a few of the questions that you should ponder when you're approaching this scene. And I don't want to spoil too much about, how to pinpoint exactly what outcome you want. But there is a whole point system assigned to those choices that calculates if you have enough points, quote unquote points, because it's this hidden point system to negotiate peace. Yeah. And if you don't meet the point threshold, you cannot negotiate peace. And if you don't have enough and there's no peace, it can only end one of 2 ways. So you either side with Legion and the Geth, agreeing to let Legion upload this upgrade to the code for the Geth, and in the process, you fail to convince the Quarians to stand down, or you side with the Quarians. Both lead to very dramatic scenes with, and in the latter, Legion actually attacks you. He holds you up by your throat and dangles you over this cliff, and then Tali shanks him with her boot knife. So very dramatic scenes, both of those. Since most of us, I think, never got to see it, here's a clip courtesy of a user named V on YouTube, and it's what happens if you side with the Geth. And so if you side with Legion, here's what happens. And if you do it like a lot of players did, where they think there's still a way to broker peace, but you tell Legion to go ahead with the upgrade, and then you fail to convince the Quarians to stand down, here's one of the hardest scenes in Mass Effect.
Also, should we give a warning here for emotional suicide warning? If that's a trigger thing for you, trigger warning, that'd be the right phrase.
Yes. Yeah. So. And that's a great idea. Trigger warning for suicide and self-harm.
All right, here we go.
So skip forward 2 minutes if you don't want to listen to that.
We did it. We killed a Reaper. Keela.
We can confirm that the Geth are no longer being directed by the old machines. We are free.
You did it, Shepard. The Geth fleet has stopped firing. They're completely vulnerable.
Shepard, Commander, the Geth only acted in defense after the Creators attacked. Do we deserve death?
What are you suggesting?
Our upgrades. With the old machine dead, we could upload them to all Geth without sacrificing their independence.
You want to upload the Reaper code? That would make the Geth as smart as when the Reaper was controlling them.
Yes, but with free will, each Geth unit would be true intelligence. We would be alive, and we could help you.
Our fleet is already attacking. Uploading the code would destroy us. Shepard, you can't choose the Geth over my people.
Why not? Our fleet is massive. We can support Shepard's fight against the old machines. If the creators no longer threaten us.
Upload the code to the Geth. Tali, call off the fleet if you can.
Uploading. 10%.
This is Tali Zora. Admiral Gerrel, break off your attack.
Negative, Tali. The situation is under control.
20%.
I beg you, do not do this. Please.
Your people began this war. We will end it. 40%.
I'm sorry.
No.
Error. Copying code is insufficient. Direct personality dissemination required. Shepard Commander, our skepticism was misplaced. Thank you.
This is Captain Cardona Vasraya. We have multiple hull breaches. Raya's drive core is offline. All ships in range. Please assist. Please assist. Escape pods not responding. All hands prepare for impact.
I'm sorry.
Tali, no!
So, that scene's just a little tragic. Just a little bit.
A little bit.
Just a lot, a bit.
Since we're primarily an audio platform, allow me to paint a word picture of that scene for our listeners who never saw it. Watching the flaming remnants of all the ships in the fleet just rain down upon the world which once birthed them, and the death of essentially her entire race, Tali decides to take her own life. She falls backward off a cliff saying, "I'm sorry." The same thing Shepard just said to her a few moments ago. When he decided to allow the Geth to go forward with the upgrade, he says, "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
And she falls backward off this cliff saying, "I'm sorry," which is like emotional damage. But my question is, who is she really saying it to, though? I don't think it's meant for Shepard. It's meant for her father.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or her people at large, or maybe everybody.
I think it's meant for, and you know, I think you have a good point. I think it's meant for her people at large, but
yeah,
I think
personally,
she is so.
I'm not saying it's also not for her father. I mean, it could be any of those things, right? Like, but yeah, it totally would make sense if it's to her father.
She's so heavily dissociating that I think, in my own headcanon, that she's saying it to her father because of all of the times that her father promised her and then tasked her with seeing it through, that she would have a home on the homeworld.
Right.
And interestingly, the words "I'm sorry" is the title of the song playing in the background there. Yeah. That tragic kind of orchestral music. And it's, in my opinion, one of the best songs in the entire trilogy's score.
Yeah, it's effective stuff. So, I mean, in the scene, both Legion and Tali die, and I mean, basically the entire Quarian race. It's I can imagine the writers working on this like in pre-production, and they're coming up with these like scenarios, like what are the kinds of situations we want to put people in, and somebody like pitching this one, everyone being like, oh man, yeah, we have to do that. It has to be an option.
Especially after talking with John Ebinger about, you know, the Morden scene and the emotional damage that he personally ensured there would be there.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's twisting the knife. We have to do that. And it's twisting the knife. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's a way to royally fuck up as bad as if you get that scene. But with the exception of those Quarians still living on, or still on the pilgrimage, or perhaps they're living in exile, yes.
Yeah, just a handful. Just a very small handful of Quarians left.
Yeah, given the war, I bet most Quarians were called back from their pilgrimage and they were going home. So, that is tragic, but I wanted to get that out of the way first because we have a much happier way that this can go. And I don't mean all the Geth dying either. So for those of you who are bloodthirsty for robot blood, aka motor oil, I'm not going there. But Shepard must convince the Quarian attack to stand down. Because if you don't, you get what we just heard. But if you do, then Legion still discovers he or it must sacrifice itself. And Tali shows an incredible amount of empathy, telling Legion that he does in fact have a soul. And then talking with Shepard after the Geth agree to, surprisingly, help the Quarians rebuild Rannoch.
Error. Copying code is insufficient. Direct personality dissemination required. Shepard Commander, I must go to them. I'm sorry. It's the only way.
Legion, the answer to your question was yes.
I know, Tali. But thank you. Kila Sanai.
Shopping for another house?
Beachfront property.
Claim it fast. It's a buyer's market. You okay? I know working with the Geth will be difficult.
I'm not staying. I'm coming with you.
I thought your people needed you. So that's usually kind of a big deal for you.
I gave up my father for my people. I gave up my freedom for an admiral position I didn't want. I'm not giving up you.
Tali.
I don't know how much time we have left. I don't know if we can beat the Reapers. But whatever happens, I want to be with you.
Then let's go make sure your new homeworld stays safe.
Thanks. When this is all over, when I know my world is safe.
Then I can come build you that house on the homeworld.
You've blown up more buildings than anyone I know. It'll be interesting to watch you try to build something. It is beautiful, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It'll be years before we can live without our suits completely. But right now... Right now, I have this.
Yeah, that Hallmark Lifetime movie. It's some really good stuff.
Hey, you know what? I love that scene, and
yeah, no, it's great. I'm just joking because, I got to make fun of the emotional stuff, whether it's the good stuff or the really dark stuff. Just gotta.
Isn't it like
do something
incredible the disparity between those two different scenes?
Oh yeah, it swings so hard in both directions.
But I kind of love that this, and cynically so, I love that this entire conversation is happening like 10 to 15 feet away from Legion's corpse.
Right. It's still pretty dark in that sense. Absolutely.
Right. That like Legion just sacrificed itself for autonomy of an entire race. And then they're like, damn, that was sad as hell. Anyway,
I want to build a house. Heck yeah, I do.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if I was joking about this in the Twitch chat here, but I don't know if anyone caught it. Legion also says, I'm sorry, making this, in all its permutations, the most Canadian scene that BioWare has ever made. Everyone's sorry.
Primary writer for Tali's storyline from Canada. Confirmed.
Yeah. Legion's body on the ground there, like, am I a joke to you? And they're just talking about a house. But you know what? It's that scene is so incredibly rewarding for Tali lovers because it's kind of what you've been working toward with Tali for so long. And she's finally, the Geth-Quarian War has come to a peaceful end. And yes, you lost a Legion in the process, but the Geth gained sentience and autonomy. And the entire Quarian race is still alive.
Yeah.
So there's really not many ways this could have gone better.
Right. Right.
In fact, there's no way it could go better in the game. But now you're standing here, and in each one of these scenes, no matter how this whole confrontation plays out, Tali removes the mask and she breathes in the air of Rannoch. And that is an iconic moment because to that point, many people have not seen, well, it's never really shown besides a JPEG on a desktop picture frame, what Tali's face looks like. But she removes her mask and she takes it in. And then at the very end of that clip, you don't hear the digital effect on her voice.
Yeah.
It's just her voice.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really special for so many people who really love Tali as a character, because you finally get to hear her unfettered by the shield between her and the outside world.
Right. Right. So we have one more clip, though. We're not done yet.
We do. We are running out of time. And if you've stuck around this long, you're going to be happy that you did. Because I have more emotional damage for you now. but okay, so assuming Tali survives how you handled things on Rannoch, if you romanced her and assuming you didn't have extremely low war assets and you bring her on the final run to the beam on Earth, then there's a fairly emotional goodbye. And it's also one of my favorites in the series, just because of how excellently this is written. If you had any investment in Tali's character at all, then I think that this one might bring tears to your eyes. So apologies to those of you who are listening to this on your morning commute to work. You're going to have to explain why your eyes are red to your coworkers. But why don't we go ahead and play it?
So this clip has a lot of action, but I've kind of cut ahead to where some of the dialogue is. So here we go. Yeah.
Do you copy? I need an evac right now. Come on. Here, take her.
Shepard!
You gotta get out of here.
I can't stay behind.
Don't argue with me, Tali.
Don't leave me behind.
I need you to make it out of here alive, Tali. Back to land. Build yourself.
I have a home. Come back to me.
Go!
So she escapes on the Normandy.
She does. And I know that that was a little soft. It's easier when you're playing the game to kind of find out what they're saying. So basically, you know, if you didn't hear that, Shepard says, I need you to stay alive. I need you to go back to Rannoch, build a home. And she says, I have a home. And it was at this point that all of the Mass Effect players were crying in the club because her whole character arc is about finding a home, fulfilling her father's dying wish for her, and then leading her people back to their homeland. And she's been searching for the idea of a home ever since leaving the fleet on her pilgrimage. And even after landing on the homeworld that she and millions of others wished to see for hundreds of years, she still goes back to the Normandy to finish what she started. Why? If she already has finished her, like, basically lifelong mission, or mission of a lifetime, well, you know, if you've romanced Tali, she makes it abundantly clear in that final run. She's telling Shepard that being with him is her home.
Yeah. Being with you is my home. I'm sorry, I just keep getting pictures of Hallmark movies in my head.
So
it's very touching. It is like, it's absolutely very touching. And it's the kind of thing that like anybody who's deeply in love with somebody just like would love to hear, you know? Like,
yeah.
And in that situation, it's chaotic and he's trying to make sure she's safe and stays alive. But you can see that there's still that emotional pull between them. And it's very touching.
Right. Like all hell is breaking loose around them.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the world is stopping for this beautiful moment to happen. Right. But it is happening. And that's kind of, it's the most dramatic, like most tragic scene in a love story, I think, that I've seen since like The Notebook.
I never even watched The Notebook. But,
And it's awesome. You know, like this scene is a testament to the same reason, whether you romance Tali or not. It's why we love BioWare games, because in this moment, you are in the story. This is you, and you've made so many decisions for Shepard to get here, and to see those decisions repeated back to you by, you know, professional voice actors. By the way, amazing performance on both Mark Muir and Ash Soroka's parts. And to see that come to fruition is amazing as a player, but from a lore perspective, it is so gut-wrenching to hear Tali say, I have a home, after all this time. And that's like the final thing that she says to Shepard.
Yeah. The payoffs in these games are just some of the best. You know, like it's very hard to find these kinds of emotional payoffs, especially across a 3-game arc in any other game series. I mean, some other games do a good job. These are top tier.
Yeah. This is... Man, I hope we continue to see games of this caliber. You know,
Hope so. Yeah.
As much crap as Mass Effect 3's endings got, does anyone have a problem with that scene?
Yeah, I mean, you can complain about the ending, but there are so many individual endings throughout the game. You know, like so many individual tying ups of arcs and stories, and like to say that the end ending ruins everything else it's ridiculous. Like, okay, maybe you didn't like the final bit, but the rest of I mean, come on. I don't know.
And heads up, you know, if Tali survived your confrontation with Legion on Rannoch, that scene is not the end for her. She's still alive. Unless you had such a low war readiness rating and then you chose destroy and everyone died, maybe she's dead. But you know, there's a high likelihood in the next game, if it's set within a certain amount of time after Mass Effect 3, that Tali could come back as a character. We already know the Geth are going to be some kind of relevant part of the next Mass Effect. It would only follow that Quarians also are then.
Yeah. And it makes sense to pull back some very key fan favorite characters in order to continue the story. So I could totally see that as well. Well, I think that wraps up our Tali Mass Effect 3 episode, Sam. We did it.
Yeah, that's Tali's arc. So hope everyone enjoyed it. I haven't really decided where we're going to go for next week's episode, but I got some time.
Yeah.
It's going to be a topical one. We're going to take a break from character arc for now. But if anyone's got any ideas in the meantime, you know, shoot me a message. And I'm always receptive.
Yeah, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with our patron chat. So if you'd like to join us for that, there's still time to sign up. And you got anything else going on, Sam? I know you're doing a canon playthrough again.
Yes, I am doing my as close as I can remember my canon playthrough of Mass Effect, the entire trilogy. But there's a small little asterisk there, and that is that I'm going to be romancing Tali for the first time. So if you're interested in that, give me a follow on Twitch. You'll see the notification when I go live. I should be live this weekend with more of that playthrough. I am in Mass Effect 1 though, so we'll try and talk to Tali as much as possible, but no alien banging for now. Twitch and Twitter, same handle at N7TheLegend.
Awesome. And thanks for joining us during the live stream at twitch.tv/robotsradio. Thanks for being here in the live chat. I love all the comments and things. And of course, I've got other shows like the Starfield Lorecast, which has been doing amazing because lots of people are playing Starfield, and the Lord of the Rings Lorecast, and a bunch of other games. Everything at robotsradio.net if you're interested in finding more content to listen to. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. Sam, this has been fun as always. And until next time, stay safe out there. We'll see you later. Thanks for tuning in to the Mass Effect Lorecast. We'd love to hear your opinion and thoughts on the lore of Mass Effect. Reach out to us on Twitter at Mass Effect Cast, or check out the Robots Radio Discord. Also, you can send us an email at masseffectlorecast@gmail.com.